Welcome to another episode of the Value Engineering Experts. Today, I'm interviewing on our podcast, Jim Kaylor. Jim's an interesting QA expert on shotcrete. And in California, they're actually doing really interesting things with final wall against an excavation support system, P3, P4 garages. And they use Dricrete. So they're really aiming for that waterproof shotcrete. Low crackage, we'll know how much. Whether we have a better mix, I believe we do. I know Jim Kaylor is interested in trying the colloidal silica. Recently, we've been featuring Robert Higgins. So we're really going to dial in mix design as a value engineering option in footprint engineering. And we're at footprintengineering.ca, and we're upgrading our website because we're starting to get busy. The good news is recently we've got approved some US patents, including a very unique overflow geothermal I call FEBTUCELL. I think it's going to change the geothermal industry. But today we're going to talk more about concrete, and in particular, my patent FeH20Loc, which features the fang feather edge, changing the standard from 1-to-1 to 2 layers of 5-inch shotcrete. We'll show some drawings. We'll have Sarah Taylor assisting me as host, so she can, show the drawings. We'll get it on the podcast, and we're going to compare systems with Dricrete. In many respects, we have the same soil conditions in the sense that in Toronto, despite the over design and this wrap slabs, we believe that pre-consolidated soil is dry, the clay and rock are dry. And the engineers that are in the know like the details of my system, which would save a guy $10 million if he's a developer. We're charging very little, really. So the pricing is going up on Footprint Engineering Inc. on LinkedIn. I encourage you to look at those posts and follow Footprint Engineering Inc. As far as our podcast goes, if you don't want to miss a podcast, because a lot of people can't make them all, then you can subscribe by pressing the button on the YouTube. We're also on Spotify, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, which is a good format for listening to them while you're driving. I know that often happens to people that they don't have time to watch a YouTube, and you shouldn't be watching a YouTube while you're driving. In any case, today Jim Kaylor will come on, and without further ado, I'll look to bring Jim Kaylor on momentarily. Thank you very much. Bye. This will be maybe an hour, maybe a little bit more, depending on how much we can learn from each other. Jim, you showed a willingness to try E5, and I'm a pretty good friends with Jim Perkenis, who does mag oxide. He went with, there's a detail there. We call this the fang feather edge. So there's 10 drawings part of my system. And so instead of lagging, a lot of the work done up here is secant wall. And they'll do lagging away from the buildings, but they rarely will do lagging near the buildings. Do you have secant walls as some of your shoring systems, or you tend to be in farmers, like virgin fields, you're not that close to other buildings? In Toronto, we do a lot of work next to other buildings, and the stiffness of a secant wall is useful. But I created a system to replace secant walls, which are interlocking holes. And I have a patent for that fang feather edge. So we do 2 staggered quilts, I'm going to call it, 5 inches thick. And I started out with a fang mix that include mag oxide, Actigel out of Ohio. Paul Finley, great guy. And that's a rheology modifier. So both E5 and Aquagel are very useful to reduce, the pump pressures. And you can get more volume out, counting strokes on one of these nice concrete pumps that does shotcrete. Show detail too, because we'll go through this relatively quickly. So this just shows that the stagger is top and bottom, side to side, and sort of consistent. We put a wood float finish on it, and then we believe you can't have any mud on the bond surface. So we just say wash it. We don't try to put a steel trowel finish. Like on your finished shotcrete final walls, you're doing probably steel trowel and adding a bit of water. So with E5, the beauty of E5 is it generates a paste, and you end up really not having to do anything in terms of, it holds the water. It makes the water heavy, and it holds that plastic shrinkage down. Infinity Slab on flat flooring is doing 100-foot saw cuts with E5, and they put Helix fibers in there. Mike knows a fair bit about flat flooring. So go to number 3, because so there's a face view of these feather joints and how they interact on the double 5-inch. Each layer is in theory waterproof, and it's certainly not leaking at the joint. The next one is drawing 4. Now this is a tieback connection. You must get into tieback connection. So I came up with a self-drilling. When you stop drilling secants, a little bit of seepage water they designed for water pressure, So I was able to come up with a unique tieback connection, get rid of the welding, and use that first layer as a weldment to the pile, which is almost like a composite T section. I get my pile size down significantly and my tieback load down significantly. So that's consistent. We go to sort of set a standard in Toronto to only test tiebacks to under 50%. We lock off at 80%. And I've done this system as a single layer in temporary shoring. Now I'm thinking more and more, Mike, that we can do this in final wall. Like, talking to Jim, he's doing final wall once. Now so that's a little bit better picture, some of the anchor details. We end up with a 40 mil cover on 10 inches of wall. And, we're going to be set back typically 2 inches to the engineer's requirement on that, which is easy to do with piles and wedges. Number 6, Sarah. So this would be like a lagging system. I think this would be similar to what you do, Jim. But, we put an 18-inch drain board. In my opinion, that drain board can go on a type 2 soil, which is soil that will basically span, that 2100 is metric, it's 7 feet. And then we just would have a roll of drain board, not the whole face. I like the idea of getting rid of the waterproofing. I think it's a needless cost and a needless schedule drain. 30 MPa is, I guess, 4,000 PSI in US terminology. So that's a plan view. And then number 7, we're almost to, so let's say that your soil is a little bit of a concern. You might have some upper fills. Then I'll do a hole in the middle. And I'll say, I'm going to go to 10-foot spacing, and I'll do a hole in the middle with the drain board on that. You can also use wick drains, but I think a drain board is a better product. So number 8. So here, we're sort of showing the same thing again without lagging. When we do this detail, because we're not putting lagging, we tend to upgrade the pile mix to, your pile mix. Like when you do lagging, Jim, you're basically putting in a very weak mix so your laborers can get the boards in, right? You're not doing face lagging, or are you doing face lagging where you weld bolts to the pile? Because they do that out west in Canada.
Little bit. We do a little bit of secant, not a lot. I know Turner did some stuff down in San Diego. And again, they were bringing it flush with the shotcrete and then putting some membranes up there and then shooting it again. But mostly, this would be it. We get more. So the wooden timber would be locked in with your soldier piles. We do some backlagging depending on the property line where they have to abut and they'll be backlagging. So your wooden timber is behind the soldier pile. But for the most part, again, that has to do with property lines and the different residential dwelling codes and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'd say probably good 75-80% is the conventional soldier piles, 10 feet on center, locked in with the wooden timber, the rough timbers.
And what are you using, a 4-inch thick board? 3-inch?
Probably closer to 3 inches to that rough timber. 3 inches, 10-foot spans. So then you go in and count your, we'll do a lot of 150 to 200 soldier pile holes. So you're looking, roughly 10 feet on center, kind of makes it easy. And again, we grout them. They come in and grout them. There's a few big companies. I'd like to see how you tie in on the conventional soldier pile lagging with your tiebacks. But it's fascinating, the secant design.
We'd love to have a relationship with you, Jim, if there's a possibility for you to help represent some of these patents down there. I think it's wide open in the States, and I'm getting more patents awarded in the States. Like I got a really interesting geothermal patent, which is based on a drilled shaft. I think that's going to be the best one of all. But anyway, you see that little tab off the pile? It's like in plan view, it's about a 3-inch by 4-inch high clip. And I weld that to the pile in the field. So I got that much welding, but I don't have any other welding. When I do that spigot, I call it a spigot. Go to the next drawing, Sarah. There's a side view. This is a triple tieback situation running R51 self-drilling bars, or, T41. And, you get 10-foot sections. And we found that the most economical rather than casing systems or drilled holes that, quality reasons. You have to do a little bit to get it next to the pile. Then you've got those tabs to do a cut cross 15M detail and 15M rebar running on the first 5-inch layer with mesh on it. Then the second 5-inch layer where I introduce that staggered quilt, I just make sure it's clean. And you can hide the tieback connection. You don't have any tieback removals in the right jurisdiction. And we used to get with even an R63 tieback, we used to get 600 feet a day, which is much higher than case systems that Keller would get when they show up on your site. Now that 5 MPa, that would be quite a bit harder than what I would want to put lagging in. But when I'm trimming that file face with a smooth excavator, or even with an excavator with teeth, usually it's a blade, you can just take that pile face off and weld, and you can easily get, with 6 guys, 1,000 square feet of that done. And so you get very high, you get very high production. You usually run out of shotcrete, you know what it's like. But if you're doing 2 5-inch layers in our soil nail wall, it's much quicker than soil nailing in that sense. And you can stretch your anchors out, right, and increase the load, because soil nailing, you might be a pin cushion of 6 foot by 6 foot. Most of your soils, I'm sure, drill open. But I would say my unit costs are lower than anybody's with this design. I noticed in when you use integral waterproofing, and I did see pictures on LinkedIn, and typically if I go with Crichton or Zypex, what they're doing is limiting their crack width warranties. And what happens, Mike, is that there's a heck of a density of rebar. And we used to see this in water treatment plants where people were pursuing, waterproof concrete, and they would sell. These are billion-dollar companies. I mean, Crichton out of Vancouver is a billion-dollar company, and it's a Canadian company. They sell everywhere, but they sell something that, quite frankly, we got beat now, because we don't need to have the closely spaced rebar. What we're going to see really much wider rebar spacing. We don't need the rebar space because we're not trying to do anything. You should try the mag oxide. Jim Perkenis, he's up in, where he is. You probably know him, Jim, but he has sold that to Sika, and they created Sika NS Admix. So he didn't sell it. He just said, I'm just going to go with these guys mainly, because why not align with the B? But he'll sell it to you. Like, or you buy it from Sika at a decent price, right? But that was a good strategy. Jim's a great guy, and he goes around in some other markets.
High energy. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I agree. He's got he has, I guess, by far the largest supply in North America. And yeah, Sika, we like Sika. We enjoy a very good relationship with Sika. And therefore, like I tried to mention before, I mean, we'll throw 3 or 4 different products, a bunch of drugs at it. We don't, the crystalline growth is part of our system at this point in time. We've looked at other stuff too. We'll do a lot of, we'll throw the crystalline growth in with the mag oxide. We like that. And again, we start off with a very, very good mix. And again, you go back to like the Oscar Duckworth's, ACI and a slab on grade wants you to start around 0.45 water cement. We like to start about a 0.40. We're not doing magic here. We're not taking sloppy 0.50 mixes and, voila, it's waterproof. We're looking at overall durable concrete, corrosion resistant, marine concrete, if you will, number of labels. But yeah, we're looking to tighten up the matrix. We want to take that mortar and we want a disrupted capillary system. I always like that term, and how we get there may depend on a number of factors. So, but yeah, I like your design, Martin. We do some with the drain board. We'll get guys that maybe will chimney the drain board, so they'll just kind of hopscotch it, plain, drain board, a section of drain board, plain, back and forth. If you want to physically move water out, I like the drain board. If it's more of an occasional thing, we have tremendous success in shooting shotcrete right over the timber. We like to pre-soak, again, beaten in by Oscar Duckworth and those fundamentals, but we surface saturated dry, big fans, and we'll go in horizontal 45-degree joint at the end of day. And on average, most of the good elite companies here, they're getting 100 cubic yards in daily, 10 loads. That's usually the benchmark, plus or minus.
So what is that? 10 guys, maybe? Would that be 10 men? And they're not tying the rebar. They come up with
a little. Yeah, the crews are a little bigger. Usually 12 guys, 11, 12, 13 guys on a crew. Obviously, a guy shooting, guy on the air nozzle. Then you have your finishers coming behind. But a full crew's probably closer to a dozen, baker's dozen here. But yeah, and we're putting in.
You tie the rebar too, like they're composite non-union guys in California?
They will come in. Yeah, the rebar is usually under separate contract in Southern California. The structural concrete guys will hire that out. There's a few big companies. So they'll inset all the rebar. When the shotcrete guys will show up the day or two before and they set their wires. We do a lot of guide wires here, across the bottom, middle, the top, the elevations, the cornices, the turns, different things. And that's when it becomes on the shotcrete man. Oscar's a little different. I know they shoot a lot, but not till final depth. they'll leave like 3/4 of an inch and come back and skim it usually at the end of the day. We do some of that. With Southern California, we've got those tricky earthquakes. So we're usually looking at 6,000 PSI mixes on the shear walls, the columns, shear column, and then we'll come back with usually about a 5,000 PSI mix, and we'll feather that in between the shear walls and the columns. And yeah, 10 loads, 100 cubic yards. That's an average day for us. That's about normal. We get good production.
So you're getting, hey Mike, the math on that you might know is closer to 40 MPa. So you're probably running how many pounds of cement in, let's say, a yard? How many pounds do you remember to get
quite a bit? Most of our mixes to get to that 0.40, we like that sweet spot. We're looking anywhere between 750 to about 850 pounds of cement. 9 sacks, not uncommon. And then we like to throw some supplemental at it. Cemex has some very good slag they're bringing in. Some of the other companies, fly ash, our quality of fly ash in Southern California has always been tough. It's been a little spotty over the years. We get a lot of Class F. We don't get the really cool, sexy Class C as much here. A little higher carbon and such. But the guys like shooting the supplemental, some type of slag or fly ash. And again, the Dricrete, our system lends to that too, because that's really what we're focused on, is that secondary cement hydration, if you will, for lack of a better term.
So my promise
most CSA.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jim. My promise on this system is a 15-year warranty and taking a waterproofing away and dealing with lower anchor lows, because when you sheet drain, and I would use strips, I go down to the under 4 situation with gravel, and the rate of seepage is less than the rate of evaporation. But the next drawing, the last one, Sarah, and then if you have to go, you can go, or you can revert. And thanks for your help here today. That's the spigot, Jim. So this is quite refined, and that's all the steel you need. You don't need angle off the pile or heavy plates. And those sizes work. I've done quite a bit of this. So by all means, feel free to use that in terms of introducing it to people, or we could work something out if there was a commercial opportunity to involve you in it. I'm not particularly greedy with these patents. I'm going to charge $3 a square foot, but in Toronto the situation is I save $200 a square foot, because these got a raft slab. We go with hydrogeology partnering, where we would tell them that you're better to drain the water than dam it. And it's just a little bit of perch water in Toronto, very, very little stormwater sourced situation. So that's good.
And I think, and that's fascinating, Martin. That's I think, to be fair too, in a larger perspective, we're probably more in the damp proofing universe. When you start talking about Toronto and Canada, and I know you get up around the Bay Area, I've had some experience. I know, like with Dricrete, very active up in the Pacific Northwest. Most of the stuff that we're doing would probably fall more under the damp proofing nomenclature. We're not looking at really consistent, severe hydrostatic pressures and stuff. So I would make that distinction too.
Yeah, I understand. I wanted to compare the differences with you today, Jim, and talk a little bit about Dricrete, bring Mike on, and try and tie north versus south. I believe that best practices, at least in foundation work, are always improving. And there's good money in foundation work, and these guys have the drills. That's why I designed a geothermal, and I just recently got the patent in the States. So Sarah, can you send him or maybe if you're still here, Sarah, can you share the FEBTUCELL drawing? And you might need a minute to pull it up, and email it to Jim as well, because I only emailed Jim a record of the drawings that Mike got today as well. Mike's background is flooring and concrete work and ICF, and I'm teaching him the foundation business because I don't want to fly out west anymore. But I don't.
Well, that's the trick of it, isn't it? Right? With I know ACI's coming up. I think they're splitting the difference. I think it's in Texas this year. But yeah, it'd be nice to get back to normally do that West Coast, East Coast two-step there. So,
have you ever gone to ACI, Mike? It might be worth you going if you're still flying. So, are you aligned with Crichton? Can I ask that, or is it a secret? Or Dricrete?
No, actually, we do a lot of work. I know Kerry Yules very well. They've got a very good group. I have some other business ventures with Kimo Scott, OK Hardware in Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands. He's probably one of the largest Crichton distributors on the planet. Very, very impressed. Like Kerry a lot. We use a lot of their products, bag stuff, where we use for joints. They have a very good kind of crystalline joint product. We use a whole lot of that. Very good company. But no, we're one of the other 4 major admixture companies that private labels our product.
Yeah, very good. I don't need to know really. So what Sarah's got up on the screen is, and send that to Jim as well. And that's a list of patents that are in Canada and the US below it. It's a couple pages. I'm going to put it, if you go to Footprint Engineering and kind of follow, I put the posts there. Now, Sarah, can you try to find the FEBTU drawing? That would be under that particular patent file. While I can, I want to share one more drawing because I think Jim understands the drilled shaft industry very well, given what he's doing. And if you can't do that right quickly, then we can give her a minute.
Give me one moment there. I'll see if I can find that one.
I don't know if I've really explained that one to you, Mike. Have I given a version of that to you? The FEBTUCELL? Have I been able to explain to you? So we got it in the US for the overflow feature. You know, there's situations that people do in ponds, or people would, let's say, take a normal geothermal, and which is usually glycol and plastic tubing, and then they put a steel casing around it and try to create an upper glass of water concept. But what I did was I got away from the glycol and I said, you know, I can do this with 25 to 50 feet of steel liner in 3 different sizes. So I can go from 16 to 48, which I put in Godrich at my place. I'm testing that with a windmill on top. Or I can go to 24-inch HSS sealed close water furnace. And then that's the drawing that I'm looking for Sarah to find the FEBTU patent drawing.
Sorry, I'm looking for it, Martin. I can't seem to find it.
Well, that's okay. It's on Footprint Engineering's site.
Oh.
I posted it recently, but it's also, if you go to the website, can you go put the website up? That's probably not bad. Websites are everything these days, Jim. So if you go to the right, I think the patent drawings, okay, are they there? Yeah. So then go to FEBTUCELL. So we're going to make this printable as well, but I can send you these, Jim, because it's going to be money in this, easy money. You know, you'll be able to get air conditioning and not have to have the fan
Boy,
on.
that'd be nice. I pay my water bill and my electric bill. It's a good month for me.
So here we got a closed system water furnace. So it's got a compressor and it works heat and cool. And then what I do is I pour a non-treat concrete in to hold the two together. And then I fill that up with water. And then I overflow that water because that closed system, and I'm talking to Mike, I'm trying to teach him this too, that closed system, Mike, has a pressure. So if you put a ball valve on it and run clean water, like feed it with a well or feed it with your city water, what I do is I overflow it. That outside liner has gravel. I drilled 52-inch on this job that I just did here. And then, so I overflow that water and it goes down and it capillaries and becomes evaporative cooling on the outside of that liner. It's like a triple liner, but that's a water furnace. The whole thing is pretty efficient. Then just to relate to my windmill drawing, which we're going to have to change, Sarah, by the way, but the windmill drawing, it came to, you know, I sort of had a breakthrough where I said, well, I'll just put the monopole windmill on top of this thing and I'll seal cap that top anyway, right where those upper arrows are. The in and the out, I put on the side, Mike, and that's arbitrary, but the piece that goes above the sealed section is a 16-inch monopole, 30 feet high with a high pole magnet motor. And what happens at 12 to 15 kilometers an hour wind, it'll turn into a generator. So you have 900, I got them out of California, actually, 900-pound magnets. And I machined the rotor of a 30 horsepower WAG motor, 1800 RPM. The safe speed of that windmill using vertical blades designed right now by Matteo Fragoni. That might be a name, you know, Jim, because Matteo Fragoni's in Boston and he used to work with Hub Foundations. It's a pretty innovative company. And so he's got his own machine shop and he teaches mechanical engineering actually at Massachusetts University. Very dynamic guy, very, very bright. Like talk about a 36-year-old bright guy. I could talk about him. He's on my podcast too. He was on a podcast about maybe a month ago. So if you can, Jim, watch Robert Higgins on my podcast because I think you're really into the concrete space. Now with E5, we believe that it tests to 80% reduced permeability and will not crack in the details that we have on that shoring system. So I don't, you know, damp proofing is true. You are in that world, but it's really based on the soil types, right? Because if you have type 2 soil or type 3 soil or type 1 soil, type 1 and type 2 will drill, and I wouldn't use the system in type 3 anyway. So I would pre-qualify it with the geotechnical engineers and with anybody. I don't tend to do detailed engineering anymore, and I just want to do value engineering, essentially what we're doing, right? So the value that comes out of standing back and coming up with a better system, what I call earth honoring systems, is proving out quite well. So we like long-term relationships, Jim. I hope that we can do that. Mike, you're going to probably thinking about some questions here. Why don't you ask Jim a few questions about his construction details? Like, you heard him talk about the 45, eh? That's what I said to you before. He's terminating on a 45 on a structural wall, whereas I'm terminating on a 10-inch feather on 5 inches.
This is all very new to me, so I'm finding this very interesting, and I wish I had more experience with it and I could ask some intelligent questions. But I mean, I understand the drawings that you've presented, Martin, and it looks really good. And I think I follow what I'm hearing from Jim as well, but I really don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Well, I'm always good to keep asking questions. Jim, you're aligned with a structural guy doing those jobs, right? You're Dricrete, but you're not designing the rebar, right? I mean, in terms of your Dricrete.
No, we work closely with both. There's a project engineer, and then usually the city has an engineer, and quite often an outside inspection lab for continual inspection on both any of the structural components, and we work closely with them.
Do you, this is something Robert Higgins has on the last couple of podcasts with me is, everyone thinks about 28-day strengths, but can we look at permeability as a durability factor? He called E5 concrete 1,000 years. I mean, basically it's a pozzolan. So when you put it in a slab, and I've done it the back of a truck here in Godrich, when you put it in a slab, it will hold the water and it cures in place. It's called internal cure. So you can go for crack filling, and we see a lot of stuff. I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn where, American Society of Civil Engineers has the self-healing crack, and they have different types of self-healing cracks, but my goal is to not have it crack. I'm thinking that we're there with technologies today, and if you put mag oxide in properly, I think you might want to try E5 without the crystalline. We can do E5 with Cell down there. Rory Bosma, I introduced you to him briefly, and I expected you guys would do some business at some point, but E5 would be $20 a yard, the right concentration. You put a gallon in, basically a truck, just a gallon. And what Joe Shetterly, the patent holder, recommends is you put it in the back of the truck and you mix it 75 to 100 turns, or it's about 5 minutes. But then that'll come out and your pump pressures will drop right away, because it's a very, very fine, almost like a rheology modifier, like Aquagel, but it's a very, very fine silica. So you're going from 10 nanometers to 100 nanometers. And that drops the pump pressure, and you end up with a paste to work with. You don't have to add water, and you don't have to add water when you're doing a steel trowel finish on a final shotcrete wall. And I'm sure they're using, I can tell by looking at your pictures on LinkedIn, and I can tell by what they're doing in Toronto. They're hitting a bit of water. The guy will put a bit of water in when the truck pulls up, and then, he'll basically the inspector will turn the other way, and then they'll wet their trowels. Yeah, there's some good information. And Joe Shetterly's a really good guy. He's a concrete technician, so he comes from a third generation finishing family. I encourage you to talk to him and try. And you probably in your area, I don't think Rory's going to cover your area very effectively. You probably can be an E5 guy, but if you're a Dricrete guy, you'd have to talk to them and keep the same brand. And I think what Joe should do, Mike, is he should be open to private label. Jim's sure interested in having better quality, but why change the name? Maybe Dricrete could do well with it.
Well, and that's an excellent point, Martin. Like I said, we would like to be at the point. We like the crystalline growth one is because it's been around a real long time, and we don't really spend a lot of time talking to our clients. We deal with a lot of owners. We do a lot of large general contractors, concrete installers, union, non-union, the whole range. We do some non-union on the residential side. We do some big, sexy, the whole gamut. And I think the system either succeeds or it sinks on its merit. And at a certain point, when you start talking about calcium silicate hydrate and secondary hydration, you can lose the average architect or owner's rep real quick. They want a structure that they can use. If you have a better, faster, cheaper, and ultimately easier system, you're going to get your 15 minutes. So how we build that product, that's guys like you and me, smart guys like Oscar Duckworth. I've got my heroes, Tyler Lay, and guys over there at Oregon State, David Trejo, Jason Weiss. Those are the guys that you want to talk about, the in-depth of the mechanics of secondary hydration, but the average person, they just want a structure. They can get up faster, cheaper, and they want service. And we try to do that without making it cumbersome or trying to be a burden. In a lot of ways, we're removing a trade. And we just follow these structural concrete guys. We kind of shadow them. And there's a certain ego stroke, I suppose. But yeah, as far as the technology, we are always open. Like I said, we've looked at some of the liquid silicates. I still market and sell in certain areas in Southern California. ISE Logic, they have an admixture, liquid silicate that had very good success. I think I'm in my 14, 15 year now. Never had a floor that's failed. And that circles back around, I think, to your friend, Robert Higgins. I like Robert, get to know him on LinkedIn, and we've had some conversations, and he's not shy to say that, the F6 committee has kind of fallen short in their commitment, I think, to the industry. It's been a little self-serving, and it's, focused a lot on testing, and we take a little different. I take a different view anyways. You put down concrete, and nothing wrong with the concrete. That doesn't need to be tested. Obviously, the greening of the planet has weakened some of the adhesives and stuff that we use, but there's nothing wrong with the concrete. So then we're looking at technologies that eliminate a lot of the flooring failures we've had since the early 2000s. I like Robert a lot. He's kind of got the gusto behind him to explain his technologies, and he seems like a smart guy too. So
Yeah, I've been very impressed, and Mike and I are, getting some trust with him. The two podcasts he did with me were really good, and I had some really real experts in from Toronto that were more flat flooring guys. So it's some of the stuff it's hard to believe, and but it's happening. I mean, they're doing saw cuts, and with the Infinity slab with Helix fibers, that's it. Steel Helix fibers and E5. They're cutting it at 100 feet. So you also have a DIN 10. I think it's 1048, Mike, the number that Robert is looking for, the confirmation test from E5, but that reduces permeability 80%, and that's that internal cure. So yeah, I think we'll keep in touch, I think. And if we could have you, even associate with our company, we'd love that, because, sometimes it's not really something where we charge, but I've started charging for mix design, like $250 an hour US. I'll charge for mix design, and Robert wants to do it with me. Like I said to Robert, why don't we do it together? Because he knows more than I do on the practices throughout the States, as you do as well. So there might be some opportunities to build things, but for the most part, I'm into sustainability, and because I have these patents, right, there's enough money in that, to take.
Absolutely, love to pursue that, Martin, and look, see how we can help contribute. I don't know a lot. I know a lot of smart people. I can't help but think when I go up to Oscar's farm there, and he's always very gracious. His family, it's just beautiful, wonderful people, and he introduces people, and Jim knows everyone. Nobody knows everyone. I have a good understanding of how people think, what's important to companies, whether you're an underground excavator, you're shooting in piles, you're the structural concrete contractor. I understand what's important and bringing value. I always think that, we're all peddlers at one point or another, but I strongly suggest guys, get your quality control manager. You can go to lunch with your ready-mix salesman, but get your quality control manager. There's nobody that understands the local material better than the quality control manager at your ready-mix, and or whether it's a vertically integrated cement company and ready-mix. Guarantee you, they know the material, the shrinkage, the durability, the permeability. You start getting into obscure, like we have this Los Angeles Rattler test. I was reading some particulars about that earlier today. Nobody knows the local material better than that quality control manager. And I strongly, you could go to lunch with your sales guy and talk about the Lakers and the Kings and the Raiders, but bring the QC guy, because he's going to have some answers that you have not even thought about before. And those are really the smart guys.
I don't know. I'm 63. I don't know how many ready-mix guys. I'm 3 hours from Toronto now, but I can do a lot on LinkedIn, and I can do a lot with my podcast now. And Mike's sort of in a similar boat. We're all looking for a way to capitalize on our expertise, and I think value engineering is the way to do that. If we can tie the experts together, right? That's my idea. That is an associate part. If you look at my website in some detail, you'll see I've got a lot of guys on there. Oscar's on there, by the way. I got a picture of him, and he's on there.
And that's a big part of it too, Martin. I spent some time with Oscar the other day. He came down and taught a class. I still got to talk to Oscar, sit him down, give him the business. It was a great class. I passed the test. I think I have to take another class or two, but I'm a licensed shotcrete inspector. But I got to be honest, I didn't pass the test by a whole lot. I think about one or two questions, and I got to give Oscar the business here. That makes it, you wonder why there's no shotcrete inspectors. It's a pretty strenuous test, but we spent the evening together. We had dinner and cocktails, told some stories, and he speaks very highly of you. So that's more than enough for me, Martin.
You know, my daughter-in-law from my last wife, which is another story, but we sent her to the blueberry farming for a summer. You know how Oscar takes kids. She had a great time, and I'm sure they Facebook, and I don't rate Facebook myself, but she's a great kid, and she became an electrician, which is interesting.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Oscar and his family are some of the most beautiful people, and today, if there's more Oscars, the world will be a better place. And that blueberry farm, that's not hard. I think I put on 10 pounds with his wife's cooking and his sister-in-law's cooking. It was very, very nice, wonderful time. Highly recommend it.
Now, do you call that, is that Napa Valley? Is that what that is?
I call it Sonoma. It's one valley over from Napa. I think he technically is probably in between, but I think he probably goes more by Sonoma Valley than he does Napa. But it's not a far drive. The grapes up there get really, really good really quickly. So
You know what he does, Mike? There's a picture on LinkedIn recently, and he was hot steaming between his bushes. So, because a lot of people will use Roundup for the weeds between what they claim is organic. But that's the way to make it organic, right? You can't let any of that Roundup near your plants. And, we see.
Oscar's very conscious of that. Yeah, he doesn't till the soil, releasing carbon dioxide. He's very conscious of that. Yeah, you really want to be up there when him and his wife and his sister-in-law do the ice cream. I hear they do a homemade ice cream where like the whole town comes through that farm, and that's quite an event as well. So
Probably know how old Oscar is, but he's got to be 60, eh? Would he be 60?
Oscar's in his 60s. Yeah, we talked about that too. He's still got quite a bit to do. I think he's throttling down on the contracting side. He's doing more. I'd like to see him help Charles out with the ASA a little more, take more active, do more papers, more research, more writing, publications. But yeah, I think he's got a lot of opportunities. He's got a few things to do before he retires. I sure hope so.
Yeah, he won a lifetime award, Mike, and he's still got dark hair. Like I'm pretty sure he doesn't have that much gray hair. Like me.
No, there's not much. He's a thin guy. There's not much fat on Oscar. He doesn't sit still too long.
Well, when he came up, and I'm trying to remember his partner's name, but they did a job in London, Ontario for me, and they 3 rows of scaffold, 3 lefts of scaffold. And they shot the whole thing in one day, up and down the scaffold. Oscar this isn't that long ago, maybe 6 years ago, maybe 8. Anyway, yeah, great people in the shotcrete industry. And I think, when we combine tradesmen and engineers properly, and we listen to each other, right? Like Oscar would listen. He's a very good listener. But then so am I. When I get a guy like Oscar, I'm going to learn whatever I can over dinner, right? So that's been the key to my success of 1,000 tradesmen that I've worked with. I have a very practical way of looking at these things after doing, my career, Jim, I've done 4,000 design builds. Oh, great. Because I was doing it in the 80s, like in an operations capacity, setting up jobs in the 80s. And then I did the HCM companies. So it's enough now, though. I think I just happy to have Sarah's help. I don't need any more. And a guy like you, Mike, to laugh about. Mike and I sit back and we kind of like people on a fence wondering what to do next with Robert Higgins and E5. But we're going to look at all the colloidal silicas independently, I think, now. I think there's some that are at pretty good price points. Not that Joe's isn't either. And I would encourage you to try it and be open to it. You can always take a job and ask your Dricrete friends, why not? David Burns and Associates.
Oh, yeah.
David Burns.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem, Martin. We've looked at them too. I know there's some that have been catalyzed. There's a few silicas. And I would agree. I think E5 seems to have a very good price point too. So no, we're very open. That has some certain advantages too. Here in Southern California, we've got a big labor shortage, like everybody. And anything you can do to relieve the ready mix truck driver of throwing bags in or something, you can do a liquid delivery. It has huge benefit. So absolutely.
I think the way to add E5 is with the super plasticizer. And I think that it's better to overdose, like to do more. They're marketing the fact that you could take 15% of the cement away. But then you wonder, how much they actually do that. They did seem to do it. You remember that one video, I think you saw, Mike, where Dan McCoy, one of the engineers on the bridges, was talking with Joe.
Yeah.
And I think they did adjust their mix. They took microsilica out, which is a powder, in favor of, or they lowered it anyway, in favor of the colloidal sill, which mixes better. You know, they're looking at a dispersion out of Purdue University's assistants from 10 nanometers to 100. And they'll say, oh, well, for shotcrete, you should use shot cure. And for this application, you should use liquid fly ash, which is really probably more correctly called liquid pozzolan, because fly ash, I don't think is quite the product that this engineered silica is. So yeah, no, I look forward, Jim, to, you and I having a long-term relationship. And David Burns, a fellow in Toronto that's got 35 years, he's on my associate partner team, and he just went over to my pay. And because custom wouldn't sell them, like they didn't use them properly. Custom Concrete's probably the biggest bag guy. They weren't really pushing their self-leveler, and Dave's a self-leveler guy, and my pay was happy to have him, 35-year guy. And he's on one of those Higgins podcasts, and he's really connected with the spec writers. And so if we start something, I think we can really do something by good people spreading the word. And I would say right now, and Mike would have to agree, that E5's price point and their basic structure is good. And if we can help them do mix design, then I think that's a great service. Why depend on a product guy to do your mix design, right? I would take the 15% right away. Based on what I've seen, I'll take the 15% out. And what Higgins and I are talking about is changing the way, putting the testing back on the ready mix guy, but also take the 15% cement out and test for durability with the DIN 1048 test, and test, and sure, look at 7 days, but look at 56 days. I would blow right past the 28 day, because there's this almost robotic reaction with 28 days. Oh, we made it or we didn't make it. I mean, if you're too 5% under, there's meetings and stuff like that. But the stuff that Robert Higgins points out is very enlightening, particularly when it comes to flooring, where he says if you use evaporative cooling, you'll have a better flooring success, because if you use fans and you get rid of that moisture that's on the concrete, particularly in a parking garage where you're going up and you're starting to capture that moisture on the roof. And I think the figure is $3 billion in flooring failures, attributable flooring failures. I don't know if that was last year, I think. Mike, did you hear that one? Did you hear?
No, I don't remember that. No.
It's really big, and it's
it's big. I would 2.5-3 billion. Yeah, it's a big number. I did my tour after Highcrete. Barrier One specialty product group, FeH20Loc. Now this Logic. I have a pretty good. I'm more of a concrete guy. I learn about the flooring, but yeah, Robert seems to have a good grasp. There's a lot goes into it. There's a lot, the environment. California's big here with these basically sealed buildings. So, it's one thing, you put a slab on the ground and you seal with the skin of the building and start playing with the relative humidity, the temperature and stuff, and it's amazing. I do a lot of work in Bakersfield, the Central Valley, not even close to the ocean, but obviously the agriculture is a huge piece of that. Put a lot of moisture in the air, and the hydraulics underneath that Central Valley, it's staggering. Some of the issues that I've seen over the last 13, 14 years. So Robert seems to have as good a grasp as any of them.
He does, and he's got a lot of integrity. If he's not sure, he's not going to say it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I like that. And I think sometimes you got to call out some of these guys that are a little more self-serving. They're more just interested in selling their wares as opposed to really addressing the product head on and, an intelligent option to counter that, because flooring's huge. That's the one thing, you get your building 95% up, and floor is one of the last things to go on. If you have to topically remediate, you don't have a lot of options. You got Coaster, Ardex, and Aquafin are all three outstanding systems, but they're not cheap systems. You're in the $7 to $8 square foot range, and you got to go back to Mr. Owner and ask for $1 million to right before you toss them the keys. That's usually, those meetings are very somber. Everyone's got their head down. It's a tough situation. So if you have a logical, intelligent alternative to that, you get down around the sub-dollar square foot fix. A lot of people are all ears. Absolutely.
The topical MVER product, which I don't endorse quite the same way as I think the admixture is the way to go in terms of the what he calls liquid fly ash or shot cure, but the topical product is called Shield, and I think it also is called Protect. You have all these different SKUs, which the basic idea is that, to me, you need a 20 to 50 nanometer silica. It's got to pass the test of silicas, which Robert Higgins has got a lot of experience with silicate. He's quite excited about E5. I think his thoughts lately are to not get anywhere where he can't get the test data. He's going to go on test data, and we're talking about changing the way the tests are done. in terms of a ready mix plant. It's got to go away from 28 days. It's got to go to the waterproofing amount. And Robert makes some very good points. So it's been great.
Can I ask can I
Go
change
ahead,
the subject slightly and ask
You have a
questions on the
question.
application of?
Go ahead.
I'm curious. You're an experienced nozzleman as well, Jim.
Well, I wouldn't say experience. Technically I'm certified nozzleman in training. I have under 500 hours. I like to say I'm a 5-minute man. You know, I could go out on my dirt bike and lead the supercross for the first 5 minutes. After that, I'd probably come in dead last. About the same thing. I could shoot, you know, for 5 minutes, but no, I don't make my living working the nozzle.
No. And I
No,
assume
no,
that, but I'm more curious about young men or women getting into the field of shotcreting. Like, is it taught in schools now, or is it taught in technical? Where do you get the experience to become an experienced nozzleman?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I know Oscar Duckworth is probably very passionate about something like that. It's a good question. It's a very small universe here. Like I said, the parent company, Superior Shotcrete, really pioneered this probably 20, 25, 30 years ago. Everyone worked for Tony Federico at some point. But it's a very small clique. Like I said, usually trained by Oscar Duckworth. A lot of Latin gentlemen, a lot of them are related, family, extended family. I don't know. You know, you kind of have to work your way up the crew. You know, you're kind of the laborer and you work your way up. Usually the wire guy's one of the older established guys, and nozzleman obviously runs the field. But how it's actually taught, I don't know, probably just through attrition, really.
Oscar gives a course, like I can answer that one because I trained 40 guys and started structural shotcrete in Toronto, doing it with Vancouver practices because it was such a popular thing in Vancouver, and used to study different markets and bring the technologies from whether it was Germany or the US. But you know, Jim's right. I mean, there's a pump guy, right? You can steal a pump guy. You can steal a shotcrete nozzle, and usually that's what's happening. They're getting a $5 an hour premium or something if they're good. They have to be durable as men, and you know, smaller guys sometimes better. But you know, somebody that could talk to at some length is Brad Martin. Like Brad Martin was with Concreate, and he shot the Lake Placid bobsled track and Whistler, and he was hired by John Zhang in Vancouver, where shotcrete is really established, to go do the Chinese. He did the Chinese bobsled track, but you know, he had to teach the Chinese, right? So he's in Prince Edward Island looking for work, but he doesn't want to hold the nozzle, but he probably still could. And he was a bigger guy, so he, you know, it's a little harder for him to go at it. Houston Kuznak, who's with Consolidated Shotcrete in Toronto, they have 100 men, and they're shooting a lot of final wall. Toronto's very busy, and Torrent has 60 men. So the guys that I trained went with those companies. And Jason, the foundation guy, said, well, we'll just keep 10 guys and do soil nailing or the odd job, you know, because you want to keep your nozzle, but you don't want to be the structural thing. And originally, when we came to Toronto, you know, Ross King was pricing. I said, don't price anything less than $12. And he went in at $9 to take the market. Well, he put Torrent pretty well to the point where they had to get bought out in Toronto. And then Verdi, the largest formwork guy, hired him. And Verdi's got 1,000 men. Now he aligned with Avenue and some other guys, Mike. So they've got all the finishers. I mean, it basically, it's people you know can pick it up. Like if a guy's small and strong, I mean, what you're trying to do is check shadowing of rebar, right? So when the rebar is layered, you know, you have to learn to shoot at a 45, right? And you have to make sure that you fill from the back to the front. And
yeah, Oscar would say a 90 degree, but there's a tremendous amount of, you know, kinesiology. You're moving. Yeah. And you're
90
right.
beside the bar, right? Is what he's saying.
Right.
You shoot in the middle of that pattern and bring it out like a trimming. The mix is a lot to do with it. A good mix is important.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah, God bless Oscar, but he uses such a superior mix. It's a little bit of a head fake. I think that mix would probably consolidate underwater by itself. So he's got he's worked out a lot of this. I think the short answer is experience. You have to shoot. You have to shoot a lot, and it's not easy. And you're right, it is counterintuitive. I walk around at about 260, 270. I was amazed at just finishing up a job, a 4-level parking garage. And the main guy, he must have been about $130 if he was soaking wet. And man, I've seen a guy just kind of mold to that hose. He works his body around it. He moved far superior than anybody I've seen. I would hold him up to some of the best nozzlemen. And I mean, the guy's like 130 pounds. You keep waiting for him to get flung in the air and tossed aside. The pressures are immense. it is a little counterintuitive, but
See, Mike,
I think just
the guy isn't
experience.
pulling the hose, eh? Sorry to interrupt you, Jim. The guy isn't pulling the hose. He's got a little light whip and a light gun, right? He's gonna bring his own gun or whatever, but then he's got stronger guys pushing that hose to him. You know, then you get more out of the little guy in the front, right? Who's about technique, right, Jim? The little guy in the front, but they have other people.
Absolutely, technique. I think movement, and I'll tell you what I've actually learned the other day. And again, seemed like a long time. It was probably 5 minutes. Working the blowpipe. When you really want to get into quality, obviously the nozzleman is key. He's the heart of it. He runs the thing. You know, faster, slower, wetter, drier. He's the heart of it. But I'll tell you, the guy in the blowpipe, I have tremendous respect to clear that path. A lot of guys will work like in kind of a U, so they'll go out maybe 10, 15 feet and build it up and then work within that space, what is already stacked in that new spot, and they'll kind of come back in a U back and forth and build up. The guy with the nozzle, the blowpipe, that is really, he is just as key as far as quality, getting rid of the overshot, the aggregate that's just in the way that will give you a void, a pocket, just as crucial and more. I've had tremendous respect
Exactly.
just working that blowpipe.
So that guy, Mike, is handling the rebound. So you're getting a rebound factor. And that's why Aquagel is known. You can actually build. Have you ever used Aquagel? Anyway, that's out of Ohio. And I recommend you guys look at that because you could put Aquagel in your mix and have a much better result. And it's quite cost effective, although typically it's going in as a colloidal or a suspended slurry and will reduce pump pressures. But you can actually build a cone like no other product. I mean, you could build a 2-foot cone with very little rebound. So they use that. My Multi-Creek in Winnipeg is a customer of Paul Aquagel. Paul's all over the US. He's got a podcast called 10 Gallons or something like that. They're joking around more than anything on it, but he's a very knowledgeable guy. That's Active Minerals, right? They're more into mining and sold for a bunch of money. The guy's got a big spread down in, trying to remember his name, but great guy. Talked to him too. So I tested my mix. I tested Mag-Ox and Aquagel and E5, and I did it with 300 kilograms per cubic meter. So that's going to be, I would say, maybe 60% of what you're talking about without being able to do both math, but we can do it later, Jim, but 60%. And I got 4,000 PSI in 28 days. So I nailed it right off the bat, right? And we did tests with Peter McLeod in Hamilton. And then I just stopped the test because I figured, well, why am I paying for tests? Like, what the heck? Let the ready mix guys test. When I started understanding the colloidal silicas, I thought, well, geez, I'll just use E5 because my double quilt system, I'll never leak, was something that can do 40-foot saw cut spacing on a flat floor 6-inch. If I do my situation, I don't have anything that's going to be a problem. And I've got the embedded clips in the first lift. We did a bypass shotcrete system in Calgary at HCM. I'm trying to remember, it was a bit of a silt channel job, which Calgary has some higher percentages of poor soils. And they were attempting to go deeper, not something Craig's terribly proud of it or me, but I managed to get paid for it. But they were trying to say, oh, we're almost at footing level, but they weren't quite there. So can we go another 18 inches? But you know, you cause an overload there. The whole one end of the job cracked. Like it cracked at 45 degrees and the piles and the wall moved 18 inches. Kind of the worst case scenario for shoring because you can't really say, well, that's a success. But that U shape, which would have been 100, let's say 20 feet, maybe 140 feet by 30 feet on the wings, there wasn't one crack in that U shape. 130 feet of pile composite action shotcrete moved forward because the anchors, like, you know, the anchor wasn't sufficient because, you know, once you go down on a shoring cut, the load goes up by the square of the height. So if you go up, you know, from 33 squared, 30 squared, and you're maybe a little bit off on your soil pressure. So, but what was very fascinating is, you know, I really proved my bypass system because, you know, the whole thing didn't break up. It was easy to fix because we just put a secant wall in behind it. You know, it wasn't really a big schedule delay. Of course, you had to hole ram it out. I did the bow job when I went to Calgary, Jim, and the bow job, actually, I should give you this, Mike. This is a very interesting. I was going to maybe record this podcast. So this is the bow excavation support challenges and lessons. Matt Janes and I, top engineer from Michigan, we did a 92-foot cut Calgary and perched 2 tieback system with a secant wall and then shotcreted the rock, right? And lead core was a big success. It saved them a ton of time and schedule. It was 5 million low, I think. Like I used to be really low all the time because I was more innovative, but it's very useful in design build to have a better idea and then offer design build.
How did you control the water in the bowl?
Well, the water actually, what happened was, when they came out with the design, it was TerraPro out of Toronto, and they designed it so they used bypass lagging and caisson wall next to the buildings, which is a very traditional solution. And Matthews was a developer, and I used to work for them when I was a general contractor. They called me up and said, would you look at this job? Tell me what you think. Jack Matthews had asked somebody to call me. So he knew I was a shoring guy back into the shoring business. I looked at it, and I was working on a Sunday, and I had the drawings with me. And it occurred to me that if I didn't do the lagging system, I wouldn't have any dewatering problem. The Bow River flows over those sands, right? But then it turns into sedimentary rock that'll stand for shotcrete. So we did a 2 tieback system with 2 robust anchors, one at 45 and one at 30. And we pinned the toe with that lower anchor. And I went in to the rock 2 meters, and then I went 60 feet in the rock. Leadcore was paid. This is value engineering and how it pays off. Matthews paid them $57,000 a month for 18 months to dewater. It was part of the deal going in to get that in there. And so Professional did that job. Jan, great guy. And we saved him 6 months on schedule. And when they got down after 6 months, they finally let Leadcore get rid of the 2-inch pump. The labor was being paid to drag around, and there was no water. The bottom. There's no water, completely dry. And so they pour a raft slab and go through all that stuff, right? The Bow Tower, which is the most expensive building per square foot ever built in North America, for other reasons, the Calgary boom in 2007, but it's not because of my shoring system. It's construction management, and Leadcore wasn't necessarily the best contractor to build it at the time. But when H&R was involved with there's deals that go on that affect jobs, right, with developers. And when H&R and Matthews was retained to do this stuff, they were friends. And part of the deal was that they couldn't use Elliston or PCL somehow. So they were excluded. So then Leadcore got it. And Mike McLeod, you know him? Mike McLeod. No. He's a great guy. He did a good job, but it was a real stressful thing. And I think he basically retired off that job or stayed around for another year, but he was at the end of the line. Pretty good guy. But he laughs about the money. I said, what did you do with that dewatering money? $57,000 a month for 18 months. I mean, he would have spent $150,000. That's it. But he got paid the whole thing because they got tired of seeing the labor move the 2-inch pump around so they could argue that they were still doing it, right? I mean, where do you pump it, right? There was no water. The rate of evaporation was exceeding the rate of leakage under my wall. There was no. Once you go in that rock in Calgary below the Bow River, it's a different strata, right? And that's the same thing in Toronto that I'm saying. They overdo the hydrogeology and say that the perch water, which is uneven boreholes, they measure it a week later. Oh, that's a lot of water. Well, if you just cut it open, it'll drain out just like the Bow did. And that's why I can save 10 million per raft slab in Toronto with the FeH20Loc. Now, I think it's worth describing these things because I know Jim's listening and you are too. I don't mean to go on, but when it comes to foundation work, Jim, if you have a job and you have the soil report and you have a cooperative team, give me a call. I'm happy to help you for nothing.
By all means.
But it works both ways, though. I might call you, and I think the way Mike and I are working now, and the way we want to work with associate partners is not so much a guy's always going to look for, oh, you got to pay me. The expertise that we can give each other when we have a problem as well. And
well, these are, and I appreciate you saying that because these guys are pretty solid people. I plan on spending a lot more time with the Deep Foundation Institute. They have a very good group out here. It's a small, tight-knit group. They sure like to party. They go to nice hotels and hang out in nice places, but they're pretty solid people. If you step up and help them out, they got long memories, so I don't see that being a problem.
Yeah, the top designer in Vancouver for Ishwood, who's considered the boutique firm in Canada for geostructural. They call that geostructural, but they're not really geotechnical. Anyway, he was president of DFI, and I think the term is 3 years. So I've been to a lot of DFIs, and I was a member. I was the first guy in the foundation business that started my own engineering company. I called it RWH Engineering, and it's quite successful today for itself and whatnot. Because what they can do is they get all the waste out, and after a while, when you're doing design build after design build and it's saving the owner money, then the owner's going to call you, right? Because he doesn't necessarily want to call somebody who's scared at permit time to do anything innovative because he has no practical crews that will turnkey and deliver that. So like your Shotcrete guy, he has to be good, and he has to, he can't bullshit you, Jim, right? Like, in other words, you guys have to work together on quality.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's,
Yeah, no, I'm a Oscar prodigy. Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to smoke me, I think, but yeah.
yeah, no, that's good. Anyway, I think we got her pretty well licked, Jim. We've been at it for well over an hour. What'll happen is if there was anything that was a concern to you in hindsight, we can edit it out later. But for the most part, we get these things the first pass, and we're not trying to ask questions to trip people up, right? We're not
Sure. We're
no
just talking here.
controversy. Yeah, that's right. But there's a lot of value in everything that's been said here today. And I find the format, having a guy like Mike along and also some of the other experts, please, maybe follow our podcast, but watch the Robert Higgins ones, recent ones. If you've
I
got
will.
respect for him,